Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Peter Parker could still remember the exact moment it happened. It was supposed to be just another patrol swinging through the city with his usual flair, the sound of his web shooters cutting through the air, the wind whipping around his body as he soared between skyscrapers. New York had seen its fair share of trouble in the past week, but nothing Spider-Man couldn't handle, or so he thought. That night was different. It was the kind of night where the air felt heavier, where every sound seemed amplified as if the city itself was holding its breath. Peter's instincts were sharp, honed from years of battling villains ranging from street thugs to cosmic threat. When he first sensed something was off, it wasn't the usual tingle in the back of his neck, but a deeper feeling of wrongness in the air. He had followed that instinct to an abandoned lab tucked away in a forgotten corner of Manhattan's industrial sector. His webs clung to the cracked windows as he swung in, the darkness inside swallowing the light from the city streets behind him. He landed with a soft thud, his feet barely making a sound as he crouched, scanning the dim room. The lab was ancient, filled with outdated computers and equipment that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Dust covered every surface, except for a few places where something or someone had clearly disturbed it recently. Spider-Man had seen enough abandoned labs to know when something was still in use, even if it didn't seem like it. His spider sense tingled again, urging him to stay on high alert. "Okay, Parker, stay sharp," he muttered to himself, moving cautiously through the lab. His mask-ish lenses adjusted to the low light, giving him a better view of the room, content. It was then that he noticed a faint greenish glow emanating from a sealed chamber in the far corner. The chamber looked like something out of a sci-fi movie, with reinforced glass and thick metal wall. Inside, the glow pulsed rhythmic, almost alive. Peter's curiosity got the better of him. He moved closer, examining the controls on the side. His fingers hovered over the buttons, hesitating for a moment before he tapped a key. The chamber hissed as it slowly began to open, releasing a wave of cold air that brushed against his skin, sending a shiver down his spine. Peter stepped back, instinctively raising his web shooters, ready for anything. But nothing happened. At first, then, without warning, a burst of gamma radiation erupted from the chamber, flooding the room with a blinding green light. Peter tried to move, but it was too late. The energy washed over him, searing his skin and rattling his bones. It felt like fire and ice at the same time, tearing through his body, breaking him down only to rebuild him in the same breath. He screamed, the sound echoing off the walls of the empty lab as he collapsed to the floor, his body convulsing. His spider sense flared, wildly warning him of danger, but there was nowhere to run. The pain was overwhelming, consuming every thought, every sense. And then just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. Peter lay there, gasping for breath, his body drenched in sweat. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat a reminder that he was still alive barely. What the hell was that? He groaned, struggling to push himself up. His limbs felt heavy, unresponsive, but he forced himself to his feet. The chamber was silent now, the green glow fading into nothingness. Peter looked down at his hands, expecting to see some kind of burn or injury. But there was nothing, no visible damage, no sign of the intense radiation that had just hit him, except for the fact that he felt different. There was a strange sensation under his skin, like his entire body was humming with energy. His muscles tensed, stronger than they had ever been before. His spider sense, usually a subtle tingle, was now a constant buzz, almost painful in its intensity. And then there was the web. Without thinking, Peter raised his wrists and fired a web at the ceiling. The familiar thurry echoed through the room, but something was off. The web was different, thicker, heavier, and glowing faintly with a greenish hue. It stuck to the ceiling with a crackling sound, as if it was laced with some kind of energy. "What the hell?" Peter muttered, pulling on the web to test its strength. It didn't break. In fact, it seemed stronger than any web he had ever produced, but there was something else, something dangerous about it. He shot another web, this time aiming at the wall. The moment it touched the surface, the web sizzled, burning through the metal like acid. Peter's eyes widened in shock as he watched the wall disintegrate under the web. Such touch. "Okay, this is bad," he whispered to himself, his mind racing. Gamma radiation, that's what it was. He had been exposed to gamma radiation, and somehow it had fused with his spider ability. But what did that mean? Was he stronger now, more powerful? Or was he becoming something else entirely? Peter didn't have time to figure it out. His spider sense flared in more violently this time, as if warning him of something far worse than anything he had ever faced. He had to get out of there fast. He swung out of the lab, the greenish glow of his webs lighting up the night as he shot through the city. But as he moved, he realized something was wrong. His body felt unstable, as if the gamma energy inside him was fighting for control. Every swing was a struggle, every movement a battle between his mind and his body. He needed help, and there was only one person he could think of who might understand what was happening to him. Peter had only met Bruce Banner a handful of times, but each encounter left an impression. Banner was the kind of guy who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders literally and figuratively. Peter had always admired him, not just for his brilliance, but for his ability to live with the monster inside him. It wasn't something Peter could truly understand before, but now as he stood outside Banner's remote cabin in the woods, he felt like they were more alike than ever. Bruce answered the door with a look of surprise. Peter. Bruce, I need your help, Peter said, his voice strained. He didn't dare for an invitation. He stepped inside, collapsing into a chair, as the exhaustion of the night's set events finally caught up with him. Bruce closed the door behind him, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. Now what happened? Peter held out his hand, shooting a strand of the glowing green web across the room. It stuck to the far wall with a crackling hiss, burning a hole through the wooden surface. Bruce's eyes widened. Peter nodded, his face pale. I got hit with a massive dose of it. Now, don't know what's happening to me. I feel stronger, but I am losing control. My webs they read dangerous, Bruce. I don't know how long I can keep this in check. Bruce paced the room, his mind racing. He had seen what gamma radiation could do. He had lived it. But Peter was different. His body had already been altered by the spider bite, giving him powers no ordinary human had. The combination of spider DNA and gamma energy was unprecedented. I need to run some tests, Bruce said, grabbing his equipment. We have to figure out how much gamma energy is in your system, and if it's going to stabilize or keep mutating to. Peter nodded, too tired to argue. He trusted Bruce. If anyone could help him, it was the guy who had spent half his life dealing with gamma radiation. As Bruce worked, Peter tried to stay calm, but the sensation under his skin was growing more intense. It wasn't just the webs. His entire body felt like it was buzzing with energy, and his emotions were becoming harder to control. He clenched his fists, trying to steady his breathing, but every time he thought about what was happening to him, a surge of anger bubbled up from deep inside. Bruce noticed the change you were feeling, and aren't you the anger? Peter's jaw tightened. It's the gamma energy. It doesn't just affect your body, it affects your mind. That's why I've always had to keep the Hulk in check, but with you. This is different. Your spider abilities are amplifying the effect. Peter looked at his hands, the faint green glow still lingering around his fingertips. What do I do? Bruce sighed, running a hand through his hair. You need to learn control. It's not going to be easy, but you have to fight it. If you let the gamma energy take over, you could hurt a lot of people. Peter nodded, determination settling in his chest. He had been through worse. He had fought aliens, demons, even gods. This was just another battle won against himself. Bruce set up a training regimen for Peter designed to help him harness the gamma energy without letting it consume him. They spent days in the cabin, testing Peter's limits, pushing him to the brink of exhaustion. Each time Peter learned a little more about his new powers he could produce webs that were unlike anything he had ever imagined. The gamma-infused strands were not just strong, they were practically indestructible. Even more astonishing was their versatility. By focusing, Peter could control the intensity of the gamma energy in his web. At a lower concentration, they behaved like his normal webs, but if he pushed too hard, the webs would burn through steel, dissolve concrete, and even emit bursts of gamma radiation that could knock down opponents. But with this power came a price. The more he used the webs, the more he felt his body shift. His muscles would bulge, his veins would pulse with a sickly green hue, and his skin would tingle, almost as if it were on fire from the inside out. Each time it became harder to pull himself back from the edge. Bruce could see it too, and it worried him. He knew what it felt like to lose control, and he could see the signs in Peter, the small moments where anger flashed in his eyes, the way his voice would rise when things didn't go as planned. Bruce tried to remain calm, supportive. "You're really doing great, Peter. It's just a slow process, but you're relearning how to control it. Just don't push too hard. The more you fight it, the more they'll push back." Peter nodded. Wiping sweat from his brow, he was exhausted, both physically and mentally. He had been pushing himself to the limit for days, determined to master these new powers, but every day brought new challenges. His webs were just the beginning. His strength had nearly doubled, and his reflexes were faster than ever, but his body felt unstable, like it was constantly teetering on the edge of something dangerous. One evening, after a particularly grueling training session, Peter sat on the porch of Bruce's cabin, staring out at the forest. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the trees, but Peter's sentiment was far from peaceful. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, that his time was running out. Bruce joined him, handing him a bottle of water. "How you were thinking about it? Aren't to you the transformation?" Peter nodded, taking a sip of water.
"Yeah.
It's like every time I use the webs, every time I tap into the gamma energy, I feel it pulling me deeper. I don't know how much longer I can keep it in check." Bruce leaned back in his chair, staring up at the sky. "It's that fine line. You have to find balance. It's not about suppressing it. It's about learning to live with it. This is what I've all learned with the Hulk. The more I tried to fight him, the stronger he became. But when I started accepting that he was a part of me, things changed." Peter sighed, running a hand through his hair. "How about what if I can? Stop. What if this gamma energy, takes over? What if I hurt someone?" Bruce was silent for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Then we will deal with it together. You were not alone in this, Peter." Before Peter could respond, his spider sense flared, a sharp jolt of warning that made him jump to his feet. He scanned the trees, his senses on high alert. "What is it?" Bruce asked, already on his feet, his eyes narrowing. "I don't know," Peter said, his voice tense. "Something's coming." No sooner had the words left his mouth than a group of figures emerged from the trees, moving swiftly and silently toward the cabin. They were dressed in sleek black armor, their faces obscured by helmets. But it wasn't their appearance that set Peter on edge. It was the tech they carried. Each of them held devices that crackled with green energy unmistakably designed to counter gamma radiation. "Bruce, we've got company," Peter said, stepping forward, his hands already raised, ready to fire his web. Bruce's expression darkened as he recognized the tech anti-gamma agents. "They were here for you, Peter." The agents moved in quickly, surrounding the cabin. Peter wasted no time, firing a strand of his gamma-charged webbing at the nearest agent. It wrapped around him, the green energy sparking as it made contact with the agent's sun armor. But instead of incapacitating him, the armor absorbed the energy, neutralizing the web. "Not good," Peter muttered, dodging as another agent lunged at him, brandishing a baton that crackled with electricity. Bruce, seeing the danger, let out a deep breath, his eyes turning green as he began to transform. "Get ready," he growled as the Hulk emerged, his massive form towering over the agent. The battle that followed was chaotic. Peter's gamma webs were powerful, but the agents were prepared. Their suits were designed to withstand gamma radiation, and they moved with military precision, attacking Peter and the Hulk in unison. Peter fought fiercely, dodging and weaving between the agents, firing webs in every direction. He managed to take down a few, but the longer the fight went on, the more he could feel the gamma energy building inside him. His vision blurred, his muscles ached, and his control began to slip. "Hulk, I can see." Peter tried to shout, but his voice was drowned out by the roar of the Hulk as he smashed through a group of agents, sending them flying. Peter's body pulsed with gamma energy, his skin glowing green as the transformation took hold. He could feel his strength increasing, his senses sharpening, but his mind was slipping. The anger, the rage, it was overwhelming. He lashed out, sending a wave of gamma-charged webs at the agents, the energy burning through their armor, disintegrating everything it touched. Peter stopped. Bruce's voice broke through the haze, but it was too late. Peter had lost control. The gamma energy surged through him, twisting his body, warping his power. His webs became unstable, their glow intensifying as they spiraled out of control. He tried to rein it in, but the energy was too much. It was as if the gamma radiation had taken over, and he was just a passenger in his own body. But even in his chaotic state, Peter knew he couldn't let the agents win. He forced himself to focus to hold on to whatever shred of control he had left. With a surge of effort, he aimed his webs at the remaining agents, using every ounce of strength to hold them at bay. One by one, the agents fell, their tech no match for the raw power of Peter's gamma-infused web. But the victory felt hollow. Peter could barely stand, his body trembling with the aftershocks of the gamma surge. Bruce, now back in his human form, rushed to Peter's side. Peter, you have to calm down. You're pushing too hard. I can see the Peter gasped, his vision fading in and out. Bruce placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice steady. Alright, yes, you can. You've got this, Peter. Breathe. Focus. Peter closed his eyes, forcing himself to take slow, deep breath. The gamma energy inside him began to subside, the green glow fading from his skin. It took every ounce of willpower he had, but finally, the energy receded, leaving him exhausted but in control. I am okay, Peter muttered, collapsing to the ground. Bruce knelt beside him, his expression grimace. This isn't an over, Peter. Whoever sent those agents, they won. T-stop, they know about you now, and they'll be back. Peter nodded weakly, his mind racing. He knew Bruce was right. This was just the beginning. Whoever was behind the attack wanted his gamma powers, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. But Peter wasn't going to give up that easily. He had been through too much, fought too many battles to let this one break him. He would find out who was behind the attack, and when he did, he would make sure they never threatened him or anyone else again. As he lay there catching his breath, Peter knew one thing for certain. The fight for control had only just begun.